Hi, I'm Aaron Patrick, recording for Rise of Podcasters video documentary production. And I have with me a very special guest. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Kelvin.
Nice to meet you, Kelvin. What do you do?
I am the founder and COO of Renegade Radio.
COO of Renegade Radio. Wow, that sounds very cool. And I'm here with him at his studio.
As you all can see, it's a very cozy home studio.
Not sure if the logo's in the shop, but he's wearing the T-shirt.
Representing.
Yeah, very good, very cool. So tell me, what's Renegade Radio all about? And tell me about some of the work you've been doing at RR.
Okay, so basically, how we always describe to people what Renegade Radio is that we are the first independent podcasting network here in Malaysia. Right, we have 7 shows under the network right now. Out of the 7, 6 of them are homebrewed. Homebrewed meaning that it's done by our internal team itself.
Mm-hmm.
You got shows like Podcast Sessions Malaysia. You got shows like Cultivating the Masses, shows like Epic Arcade, even a Mandarin one called 青春保鲜,
Wow.
which roughly translates to like pillars of life.
Wow,
Right.
that sounds very philosophical.
It is. It's a podcast about slice of life, love, work, relationships, family, etc. But it's all in Mandarin.
Right.
So yeah, that's that. And we also have a show called Two Booknets Talking.
What's that about?
It's a podcast about books. It's a podcast about books and all things bookish topics, hosted by Hani and Diana.
Wow. And among other podcasts under Renegade Radio I've heard of Epic Arcade.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you guys talk about that in Epic Arcade and also Passage?
I'm glad you brought Epic Arcade up because that is, I always see Epic Arcade as the R&D show. It's that show that is so different from the other shows that we have under the network. It is hosted by myself and Afiq Kamarudin, a very good friend of mine. That show is unscripted. Most of the time we go into the show not knowing what we're going to talk about.
Wow.
And we can just sit down. Like, our friendship is so tight-knit that we can sit down not knowing what we're going to talk about, and we can just talk for like an hour, 2 hours.
Just talking about whatever.
Talk about all things gaming. Because
Right.
Epic Arcade is a podcast
Of course,
about video games, right? And yeah, it's a very, very different show.
Nice. I find that podcasts that are very like unscripted and like very natural are those kind of like the best places to be, because like as a podcaster myself, I tend to script my shows a lot,
Mhm.
just to make sure the content is like right on point where I need it to be. But I find that those who are doing podcasts which are very very spontaneous, it's very natural, it's very very wow.
In that sense, I do agree with you. Mainly because Epic Arcade revolves around gaming, right? And you can't be too serious, I would say. You can't be too businessy, too serious, very entrepreneurial. You want the factor
yeah.
of fun, right?
course.
And if you script it, it's just gonna be it's just gonna sound like you and your co-hosts are just reading off a script, and that's something that I do not visualize for Epic Arcade. So we just went the unscripted route. We do have point forms of what we want to cover at times, and yeah, just with that point form, we can come up with like content for about an hour or so.
Yeah, the whole theme of having fun. Cool.
I mean, if you started a podcast and you're not having fun, then you might be doing something wrong.
Whoa, okay, I see. Yeah, I mean, there are many reasons why people would start podcasts. Some do have fun with it. Some is like, because people ask them to do so, or like.
Yeah, fair enough.
For so Renegade Radio is this local, I would say, podcasters consultancy kind of network kind of thing.
That's Renegade Plus, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
so there's separate branches.
Yeah, so Renegade Radio Network is the umbrella that holds all the podcasts under the network. And then we have an creative agency arm called Renegade Plus. That's where the consultancy comes in. That's where the post-production comes in. That's where all the, what I always call it, the 360 podcast solution services comes in.
Right. So outside this Renegade Radio, so for like local Malaysian podcasters, have you like met any of them? Like how many local Malaysian podcasters do you know so far?
I know a number of them. Like straight off the bat, Isa from the Seek to Speak podcast,
Yeah.
Roshan from the Rumah Roy podcast, the Pendulum Boys from the Pendulum Show, Loy Jun from Take a Power podcast. I would confidently say that, like, I know or have befriended a lot of local podcasters.
And on top of that, you guys also started this Malaysian podcasters group on Facebook.
Yeah,
with a number of other Malaysian podcasters.
It's called the MPC, Malaysia's Podcasters Community. We have about, last I checked, it was close to 400 members, and a majority of them, I would say 99.95% of them are Malaysian.
Wow, that's a lot. All right, so coming down to like, when you were starting out as like podcaster, right? So what does it mean to you? So what is podcasting to you really?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
What is podcasting? The question is, what is podcasting to me?
Yes.
Entertainment, right? How do you take something mundane and make it entertaining?
Is podcasting mundane?
Depending on the topic, I'm not saying the act of podcasting is mundane. I'm talking about things like I don't remember the guy's name. Oh my god, Blueprint of Armageddon. I forgot the host name already, but it's basically a podcast about World War II.
Wow.
Right. And if I throw you the question, how do you make history fun? How do you make history entertaining?
Yeah.
Right. That's the challenge, right?
Yes.
Right there. Hence why I say it's like, how do you create more entertainment value? Because one thing about podcasting, it's so limited. Limited as in you only have audio, right? But today you see a lot of podcasters having video content, right? So you can either choose to consume the content in audio form only or video form, like a YouTube channel, for example, right? So yeah.
Then would you say that podcasting, like specifically audio podcasting, is like unique, as it would stand out against like other forms of like media out there?
A lot of people don't agree with me when I use this word, but I find audio podcasting a very intimate experience. Right? Reason being that when you listen to a podcast, it's basically just you and the host. Right?
Yeah.
You subscribe to, like for me, I like to listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I like to listen to a lot of horror podcasts. And more often than not, it's just me alone listening to what the hosts have to say. Right? And it's more often than not a conversation. It's more narrative storytelling. Right? So for half an hour, for an hour, it's basically just you listening to one person speaking. And you feel like you can befriend them, like hey, I already know you, But yeah, hence why I call it intimate. And a lot of people don't agree with me, and it's completely fine.
At least for those solo shows where it's like not a monologue, but they are actually having that conversation with you.
Take Epi Arcade for example. Right, we have a lot of people who say it's like they really feel like they're in the room with us when me and Afiq are talking, right? And some of them also feels like they're eavesdropping into a conversation between two best friends. Hence why I say it's like, I call it intimate because you kind of know them, but you don't know them as in like the host.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. What do you think about, say, the accessibility of podcast publishing platforms such as, just to put it out there, maybe Anchor, Buzzsprout? Like, anybody can be a podcaster these days with just the click of a button. What are your thoughts on this? Is this like a good thing or a bad thing?
I think the more podcasts there is, the better it is for the industry itself as a whole. There's no point gatekeeping podcasts, right? Everyone has their own opinion. Everyone has a story to tell, And podcasting, just to start a podcast itself is so accessible now compared to like when we started 3-4 years ago, or like 4-5 years ago, right? You literally can record a show with your laptop. You can record a show with your phone, and you don't really need fancy equipment until you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this full time. You know, then you can start thinking about like investing in proper equipments, for example. So to answer your question, yeah, the more podcasts there is available, the better.
Unless it's stuff like, I don't know, misinformation, false info, news, false
I don't
news.
know. Okay, in that sense, like, okay, let's just take the topic of fake news, for example, right? Again, everyone has their right to voice their opinions, for example.
All right. Yeah.
It's not hard to start a podcast, and if you have an idea, you can just voice it out behind the mic on your phone, on your laptop, and you can just publish it on like Anchor, Spreaker, Spotify, and there you have a podcast, right? And this is me talking about it quality aside. I'm just talking about content itself. It's super easy, super accessible, and I still believe we need more local podcasts. We need more Malaysian-made podcasts.
Emphasize on the local and the Malaysian.
Yeah, Malaysian-made podcasts, because I think last week we had a conversation about this. I mentioned something along the lines of like, you see podcasters popping out and sprouting out like mushrooms. Every day there's a new podcast. You know, every day there's someone new in the game. But how long do they actually last? You know, I have met a lot of podcasters throughout my journey starting RR. And I would say a lot of people that I've interviewed before, a lot of people that I've spoken to before, lasted only like 12, 20 episodes. And then it's what my friend Norman called pod fading. You know,
Wow, okay.
they just disappear. It's maybe it's not their cup of tea. Maybe it's something that isn't suitable for them. Maybe it's too much time. You know, personal time comes into play. Family time comes into play. And they just pod fade.
Right. So, I mean, what would the reasons be for like Malaysians, especially for starting a podcast, if you know?
I think throughout the conversations I have with local podcasters, they always have a great idea. You know, they always have a great idea. Take Isa, for example, you know, the
Right.
Sick to Speak podcast. Her podcast revolves around woman empowerment. You know, when she started, there weren't much. Now there's a number of other woman-centric or like woman empowerment podcasts that are made by local Malaysians and local brands as well. It's all about the idea, right? It's all about take Podcast Sessions Malaysia, for example.
Yeah.
It's so meta. It's a podcast about Malaysian podcasters, right? And I thought that was a really fun idea, just to interview local podcasters on their journey of why they started their podcast, how is it going, and where are they going with the podcast, right? And it also gives back the value to other aspiring local podcasters. Like, hey, I also have a great idea. I want to start a podcast too. How should I start a podcast? Well, listen to the journey of all these other podcasters, and you can make your decisions later on, you know?
Yeah. See, but what do you think about let's see, how this all contributes to the saturation? Should I say the oversaturation of content in the podcasting?
I think
field?
oversaturation is also a good thing, right? In my opinion, like personally, how I see it, it's like it works as a motivation for me to keep going. When I see other podcasters that are doing really well, you know, really well produced show, really clean quality in audio, they even have video content, it makes me feel like, oh damn, I also can do that, and I believe I can do it better, you know. So saturation is one thing, saturation in genre is another thing, but in the end of the day is how you stand out, and how do you create the value and entertainment to your potential audiences. You know, if you subscribe to the show, how I always describe to our aspiring podcasters, it's also something I mentioned to you last week. Give me a reason to press play. You are expecting me to sit down and listen to you speak for 30 minutes, 60 minutes. Why should I press play? What is so valuable in your content that I should listen to it? So that's the big question mark that all content creators, I believe, have gone through before. What episode do I want to record? Who should I interview? What angle do I want to focus this story along the lines of? And yeah, that's up to the content creator and how they want to bring any topic they have in mind to let their audience decipher and consume. And at the end of the episode, or like the end of the show, what is the biggest takeaway, for example? Right?
Yeah.
So always give your audiences the reason to press play.
Yeah. Bring value to
Yeah,
your
it's. I mean, at
audience.
the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
always value, lah. Right?
Right. So it's no different from that of like, because even let's say if I were to compare audio podcasts, I mean, I wouldn't say, because like podcasts, I always think like audio, because like that's the primary thing, but then they couple it with video as well, compared to other, like say visual content, maybe short form visual
Mhm.
content, because like TikTok also, you want to say TikTok is like
Yeah,
very
it's
saturated.
micro
YouTube
content at
also.
the end of the day, lah.
Right.
Right?
Okay, cool. What do you say? Have you encountered people who say that podcasting is boring because it's long?
Yeah, all my friends, like all my closest friends, don't even listen to podcasts.
Oh man.
Like all, like even my girlfriend don't listen to podcasts because they just don't have
Ooh.
the
Shit.
attention span. Like it's completely fine. Like recently, during the pandemic itself,
Right.
my consumption of podcasts has dropped like 90%. I rarely listen to podcasts because when I consume podcasts, I usually consume it when I'm driving. When I'm commuting, when I'm
Yeah.
walking. But since the pandemic, we all have been working from home. I rarely have the reason to actually drive out to like meet people, go somewhere that is like half an hour or like somewhere far, right? And how I consume my podcast is like, if I know that journey is going to take me like 10 minutes, I'll listen to a podcast that is like 10 minutes long. If I know that journey is going to be like half an hour with like traffic jam, I'll pop another podcast, 99% for example.
Yeah.
That is around the lines of like half an hour to 45 minutes.
So it's something to like accompany you on your journey.
Yeah, definitely. Because
Would you say decorate your time, like how you would listen to music while doing stuff as well?
yes, that's how I feel about podcasts. Like when I commute, why not along the lines of the journey I learn something new, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's very cool. If so, like there's a lot of people they would say, if you, I mean, you just mentioned of like people who say that they don't like podcasts boring or like that. But what would be some of the things you would tell them, to like encourage them towards consuming podcasts? What more creating it?
Find their niche.
Find their niche.
Because I see podcasts like subreddits.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any topic that you like, any hobbies that you like, there's probably a podcast about it. There's podcasts about golfing, podcasts about cycling, podcasts about property, podcasts about NFTs. Anything that you like or have interest in, there's probably a podcast out there. Find one that you like, subscribe to it, listen to a couple of episodes, see if it's suitable for you. If not, find plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. There's last I checked there was like 3,000 new podcasts that are available on iTunes every day.
Wow.
So in terms of content, you literally have unlimited options.
So now we're in this new normal brought about after like post pandemic and all. Similar to media, how media is always evolving. Would you say because of that continuous saturation of content on podcasting, would that be the new mainstream, or are podcasts still considered niche?
In Malaysia, I would say that it's still considered niche.
Ah,
Right.
Right.
But if you're talking about other countries like the States or or Europe, for example, or Australia, for example, I think podcasting is part of their social cycle already. You know, I believe, I don't have the numbers for this, nor do I have any stats for this, but I believe more people consume podcasts overseas than they do in Malaysia. Because in Malaysia, traditional media like radio, for example, is still a very strong medium. Right? So like, okay, if I ask you the question, how many of your closest friends listen to podcasts?
My closest friends.
Like
Some of them, I mean, okay, for context, we're all like Gen Z youth. And I would like to think at least my closest friends would listen to some podcasts. If not local, then like overseas podcasts.
Like for me, not many of my friends listen to podcasts that I know of. When I have conversations regarding podcasts, it's usually with other podcasters or like colleagues within the industry itself. Consumer wise, when it comes to commuting, for example, it's still either radio or Spotify, where they listen to music when they commute. Not many of my personal friends listen to podcasts, and most of them just say that it's not interesting, or they don't have the attention span.
Right.
I believe that they just haven't found one that suits them.
So guys, if you're listening to this, find one that suits.
Yeah,
your niche.
really. I mean, like,
Yeah.
as what I usually do is, like, if someone comes up to me and is like, hey Kel, I want to try getting into podcasts, you know, I will usually ask them the what I call like the SOP questions. You know, what do you like? What's your hobby? What is something that you think you can get into? It's very similar to audiobooks, for example. Do you listen to audiobooks? I tried and I can't get into it.
I just read books via
Yeah,
normal books.
I just read books like a normal person, but sometimes what we normally do as podcasters is like we'll just try to recommend them a podcast that they might like, and it's completely up to them to be like, you know what, this is interesting. I'll subscribe, listen to a couple of episodes, see if this is for me or not for me. So yeah, like I would never recommend any podcast that I produce or under the network to my friends, right? Because I find it very biased. I find it very like
unless the
like
topic suits
tatau
them.
malu, you know?
Yeah.
So I usually don't do that. I would always recommend them something that they might like, you know, or a podcast that I personally subscribe to that I think, hey, I think this might suit you. You know, check it out.
Cool. So I mean that will also apply to those wanting to start podcast, finding their niche as well. So okay, that are the following up questions. But before that break, let's check this out, right? What would you say the podcasting process is like? Like, how are podcasts made really? Like,
I think that's a very subjective question.
so anyone can just do it how they like. But
like-
how would you do it though? I mean, considering you have quite the studio set up.
I'm just looking around. Like, how would I do it? Okay, how would I do it in terms of recording? How would I do it in terms of researching?
The whole thing.
Damn, man.
A to Z.
That's gonna be like an hour worth of content for you.
But
Okay, just to sum it out.
Yeah.
Just sum it all down. It's basically finding a topic that I think that is interesting, pitching it to my colleagues, pitching it to my producers, pitching it to my partners.
A lot of pitching.
Yeah, find the right angle. Like, okay, I found this topic I really want to talk about, but there might be like 4 or 5 different angles that you can talk about for the episode itself. So find what's the end game, you know. Then you start finding the right people. Sorry, before that, you start doing research. Okay, you need to know A to Z of whatever this topic is about. Then once you find the questions, once you've done your research, you have your questions, you find the right people to answer those questions. All right, and then it's recording, it's doing a lot of field work, and then once you have all the materials, you go back to the studio, you do post production, and then you release. and that's usually done within like 1-2 weeks.
Oh, that's 2 weeks. Post-production, to give context, is a lot of editing, a lot of cutting.
That's where I come in. That's
of
where
the-
I specialize in.
Oh, if you guys are looking for a guy.
I'm your guy, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it really breaks down because in my team, in my team we have producers that actually specialize in research. You know, we have people who specialize in scripting. We have people who specialize in coming up with questions. I mean, which is basically research, and then people like me who specialize in. I mean, I wouldn't call it specialized. Like, I have an interest in post production. So majority, I do the QC, I do the post production, I do the editing, I do the cutting, and then once that's done, I send it out to my producers. Then they'll do a final QC, and then we're like, okay, this is good. You know, if not, they will just jot down notes on like the docs, and be like, okay, we don't like this, maybe you can change it up. We don't like this, maybe you can change something else.
Right. Even for release, it's a bit of work as well because you have to upload, have to make sure it's upload the RSS feed, and then social media as
One
well.
of the biggest
Promotion.
misconception of podcasting, people think that, what is so hard talking behind a mic,
Oh, yeah.
right? And then once they've done it, they'll be like, shit, I have to think of all these things. And then, oh no, it's not done yet, I have to do post-production, And then after post-production is done, once you press upload, that's not done yet, you still got to go for marketing. You got to create audiograms, you got to create postings, And then once that's done, you got to go for copywriting.
Oh, shucks.
Right.
I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Copywriting.
So there's a lot of factors that goes into podcasting, and I would tell people it's not hard. It's really not hard. Just try to commit to 4 episodes.
So after all that, do you think podcasting is easy? Is it hard?
No, podcasting is not easy.
Yeah.
I've helped people start their podcast. I've helped people do production for their podcast.
Made like a couple of podcasts under the umbrella.
Yeah, created some podcasts on my own. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. One thing I can tell. I mean, this is also a personal preference. During the pandemic, a couple of my shows have went complete radio silence, mainly because I tried virtual recording and I really didn't like it. I like now you're here in my studio, you get to ask me questions and you can see my body language. We can have eye contact. We can have that. I don't know what to call it, but it's just different from virtual recordings.
Right. Whereas most of my episodes were all virtual recordings and somehow.
What do you think about recording in the studio like this, like
it's
a
so
face-to-face?
much better. Like the
Right?
conversation is so much more organic, and like you don't have to worry about your internet cutting off or you talking over the other and not hearing. This is so cool. This
Yeah.
too.
Hence, like I'm so used to face-to-face recording.
Yeah.
That virtual recording just irks me a bit. Not because it's bad. Actually, it is bad. I just, again, personal thing. I don't like it.
Maybe that's why you rejected my offer for the online interview.
Yeah, I know. As long as you're fully vaccinated, I'm more than happy to have you in the studio.
That's cool. Thanks.
Right.
Very nice. All right. Cool. Now, coming back to our topic on local Malaysian podcasters, what do you think is the support base like for local podcasts here in Malaysia?
Almost nada. It's all self-sustainable.
Right. Like, no. What would you define what as like self-sustainable?
Self-funded podcasts, self-produced podcasts. Basically it's all like, I would say at least 80 to 90% of local podcasters are what I would consider indie podcasters.
Right.
Right, people like yourself. You funded your own mic, you funded your own headphones. You are not being sponsored by anyone. Right?
Yeah, out of our own pockets.
Yeah. Everything that you do is out of your own pockets, and more often than not, you don't expect an ROI. I'm doing this because 1, I feel like it. 2, I find it interesting. 3, it might be a hobby. If money comes, okay, good. If a sponsor comes by, yeah, sure, I'll take it. But more often than not, it's just indie.
What do you think would be the opportunities that will come with podcasting? You did mention that it's only by chance a sponsor will come. Like, yeah, monetization, full-time jobs.
You're just gonna be super thick face, man.
Huh?
You're just gonna be super thick face. Like super
Yeah.
thick face. Like what we did like for Epic Arcade, we kind of scored Asus as one of our sponsors,
Sheesh.
right? And yeah, that was just us being thick faced. We just shot an idea to them. It's like, hey, we would like your support because we're thinking to do this. No one else in their industry have ever been on a podcast before. You guys can be the first movers, blah blah blah. Just be super thick face and don't expect anything in return. If they reply, they reply. If they don't, it's fine. Plan B, right? And they actually replied. So plan A worked, and yeah, we got them as a sponsor.
So it's all about taking a chance and
Yeah.
selling that value and like hoping they'll buy into it.
Yep.
Also. Making people like believe in your thing.
Yeah, basically that.
Right. So cool talking to you, Kelvin. One last question. What would you say is the direction and impact of podcasting for Malaysia in the near future?
What is the?
The direction and impact of podcasting for Malaysia in the near future. In the years to come, where
I
you
would
see-
say for the
Yeah.
next 3 to 5 years, it will still be in the level of acceptance.
Okay.
Meaning that if you ask me this same question 5 years ago, I would tell you, no. No one would listen to podcasts. But then now, looking at how a lot of local brands have started their own podcasts, local influencers, local artists have started their own podcasts, I believe this will create a snowball effect in the next 3 to 5 years where it would be a norm. Because our colleagues in Singapore has already mentioned that podcasting is a norm. People listen to podcasts not because they have to, it's because they want to. People listen to podcasts because they find it interesting. People listen to podcasts because they found their niche, right? They found their ideal podcast. So I would say Malaysia would be 2-3 years behind. But in the next 3 to 5 years, I think it would be a very, very normal thing.
Anything else to add? Yeah. I think that's it.
All right.
Cool. Nice. Once again, I'm Aaron Patrick, BMCC 2021082. This is Rise of Podcasters. Now signing out.